My name is Elise Harper. I'm 32, and for 12 years, I've worked in Army logistics, the kind of job people never clap for because they don't understand what it really means. I don't kick down doors. I don't jump out of helicopters. I'm the person making sure the people who do those things have food, fuel, ammo, and working equipment when it matters. It's unglamorous work. It's spreadsheets and supply routes and convoys that have to leave on schedule. But when something goes wrong, people don't just get inconvenienced. They die. And maybe that's why betrayal hit me the way it did. Because when your whole life is built around preventing catastrophe, you start to believe you'd recognize it the moment it walks into the room. I didn't. I met Ethan Caldwell in 2015 at a friend's cookout in San Antonio. He was a dental hygienist, clean hands, calm smile, the kind of man who talked to you like you were the only person in the room. When he laughed, it didn't feel like noise. It felt like warmth. We dated for a year, and when I got orders for a 9-month deployment to Kuwait, we did what practical people do when the calendar threatens to break you. We kept it simple. No big wedding, no ballroom, no invitations. Just a courthouse appointment, a ring, and a promise that sounded stronger than it probably was. I told myself it was romance in a different language, commitment without the performance. Ethan said all the right things, that he understood military life, that he knew distance wasn't the same as loss. And for a while I believed him. The deployment wasn't combat heavy, mostly supply chain coordination across 3 forward operating bases, long days in climate-controlled warehouses, organizing shipments, fixing problems before they became emergencies, boring work punctuated by moments of absolute chaos when an order got delayed or a convoy needed rerouting. Ethan seemed fine at first. We video chatted twice a week when bandwidth allowed. He'd send care packages with decent snacks and handwritten notes. He'd show me his lunch breaks, complain about difficult patients, tell me about a coworker who didn't sanitize properly like that was the worst thing in the world. Normal life. Comforting life. Back home, my family was my family. My parents, Donald and Patricia, ran a small accounting firm in Austin. Middle-class upbringing. Suburban house. Family vacations to national parks. College savings accounts that actually existed. Good people, but with one massive blind spot. My younger sister Jasmine, 29. Growing up, Jasmine was the fun one. Charming. Magnetic. The kid who could talk her way out of anything with a smile and a story. She bounced between jobs the way some people bounce between streaming shows. Never finishing, always claiming the ending wasn't worth it. Construction work. When she felt like it, then bartending, then a short-lived stint at a boutique where she got fired because the manager didn't respect her vibe. She lived in a studio apartment my parents helped subsidize because apparently adulthood was optional if you performed it with enough confidence. The favoritism wasn't cruel. That's what made it worse. My parents genuinely believed Jasmine needed more help because I was naturally responsible, as if responsibility was a personality trait you're born with instead of a choice you make every morning when you wake up and decide not to ruin your life. I was overseas making sure supply lines didn't collapse. They were paying Jasmine's rent because she couldn't show up to job sites on time. Still, they were my parents. I called when I could. I sent weird souvenirs from overseas. I kept the connection alive like it was my job, too. Ethan and Jasmine knew each other from family gatherings, holidays, my parents' anniversary party, that courthouse day when my mother cried and my father shook Ethan's hand like he'd just joined the team. Normal in-law stuff. I trusted them both. That was my first mistake. The first hint something was wrong came about 6 months into my deployment. Ethan's video chat schedule started getting slippery. He'd miss our planned calls, then text hours later with an apology that didn't quite fit. Sorry, I fell asleep. Sorry, work ran late. Sorry, I didn't hear my phone. And when we did connect, he seemed distracted, looking off camera, keeping his answers short, like he was trying to get through the conversation without stepping on a landmine. At first, I told myself he was struggling. 9 months is a long time, even for people who claim they're built for it. I tried to be understanding, sent more messages, more care packages, more reassurance. Then the photos stopped. Ethan used to send pictures constantly. His scrubs at work, the stupid meme he saw on the break room wall, the dinner he cooked and insisted was accidentally restaurant level. Suddenly, nothing. When I asked about it during one call, he got defensive. I just don't want to bother you with trivial stuff, he said. You're doing important work. I don't want to distract you. It sounded noble, but something about it landed wrong. like a line he'd practiced in the mirror. My buddy Kevin noticed I was off one day while we were processing equipment requisitions. Kevin had been married 8 years and had done multiple deployments. He had the kind of quiet wisdom you earn by surviving your own heartbreak without letting it turn you cruel. "Everything good at home?" he asked, leaning against a stack of crates like he already knew the answer. "Ethan's been weird," I admitted. "Distant, missing calls, acting strange when we do talk." Kevin didn't joke, didn't try to lighten it. He just watched me for a beat and said, "Weird how?" I explained the pattern, the missed calls, the shorter conversations, the defensiveness, the way he'd started angling the phone so I saw less of the apartment. Kevin listened quietly, then asked the question I didn't want to hear. "Do you have any reason to suspect he's seeing someone?" The suggestion hit wrong, like sand in your mouth. "No," I said too quickly. "Ethan wouldn't do that." Kevin didn't argue. He just nodded slowly. "Okay, but if you're worried, don't let it sit in your chest until it turns into something you can't control." I told myself I was fine. Then month 7 delivered the first real crack in the story. Ethan posted a photo on social media, the first one in weeks. He was at a restaurant with friends, smiling at the camera, looking genuinely happy in a way I hadn't seen on our video calls. Normal enough, except in the background, clear as day, was Jasmine. And it might have been nothing, if not for one detail. The timestamp showed it was posted at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. The same Tuesday, Ethan had canceled our scheduled video call because he had to work late. I stared at that photo for an hour, zooming in, checking the date, trying to find an innocent explanation that didn't require me to rewrite everything I believed about my life. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe they ran into each other. Maybe I was paranoid. Kevin found me later, sitting outside the warehouse at 2 a.m. with my phone glowing like a confession. "You should call him," he said quietly. "Ask direct questions." "What if I'm wrong?" I asked. "Then you apologize," Kevin said. "But if you're right and you don't ask, that's worse." So I called Ethan the next morning during his lunch break. I kept my voice soft, normal. Asked about his week, about work, about what he'd been up to. He gave vague answers. Busy, tired, same old. Then I said, "Hey, I saw Jasmine in the background of your restaurant photo." Silence. Not long. 5 seconds, maybe. But it felt like my whole body recognized the pause before my mind did. "Oh," Ethan said finally, too casual. "Yeah, small world, right? She was there with some friends." "You didn't mention it," I said. "It didn't seem important," he replied, and I could hear him smiling like he thought a smile could cover a lie. But in the photo, Jasmine wasn't across the room with other people. She was close enough to be in frame, close enough to matter. And in that moment, something in me shifted, not into rage, not yet, into something colder. I didn't call him out. I didn't accuse. I just said, "I miss you. I'll be home in 2 months." "Yeah," he said quickly. "Me too. I can't wait." He ended the call saying he had a patient waiting. That night, I did something I'm not proud of. I logged into our shared phone account, the plan I'd set up before deploying so he could reach me easily, and I checked his call logs. Pages and pages of calls. To Jasmine's number. Multiple times per day. Calls lasting 20, 30, 40 minutes. Starting about 4 months into my deployment, and increasing in frequency ever since. The texts were worse. The phone company didn't store content, but the metadata showed hundreds of messages. Late-night exchanges at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., when I was coordinating logistics under fluorescent lights and he was supposedly asleep. I sat in my bunk, staring at those records like they were a battlefield map. And I realized something terrifying. The disaster I'd spent my career trying to prevent had already happened. It was just happening in my marriage. And everyone I trusted was standing in the smoke, pretending it was fog. I closed my phone. And in the silence that followed, I made a decision. Not to confront. Not yet. To plan. Because if Ethan and Jasmine wanted to turn my life into a lie, then I was going to do what I do best. I was going to follow the supply chain. And I was going to track exactly where everything broke. The hardest part wasn't the anger. It was the discipline. Because once you see the pattern, once you know the calls aren't nothing, once you feel the shift in someone's voice when they're hiding a second life, your body wants to react. Your chest wants to burn. Your mouth wants to spit out accusations like bullets. But I'd spent 12 years training myself to do the opposite. In logistics, you don't panic when a supply line collapses. You document. You verify. You build the chain of evidence. You fix what you can, and you expose what you can't. So I did the same thing with my marriage. I kept showing up to work like I wasn't bleeding internally. I processed requisitions, coordinated shipments, followed protocols, smiled at the right times, ate in the mess hall, sent emails like a woman with nothing personal happening in the background. And every free moment, I built a file in my head. Kevin watched me for a few days after that call log night, like he knew I was balancing on something sharp. Finally, during a break outside the warehouse, heat pressing down, sand biting at our boots, he said, "You sleeping at all?" "Some," I lied. Kevin didn't push. He just nodded toward my phone. "You talked to him again?" "No, not yet." "That means you're planning," he said, not a question. I stared at the distant line where the desert met the sky. "I'm just making sure I'm not crazy." Kevin's expression softened in that way married men get when they've seen pain before. "Elise," he said quietly, "you're not crazy, but don't let this turn you into someone you don't recognize." I wanted to laugh, because the person I didn't recognize wasn't me. It was Ethan and Jasmine. I didn't confront either of them. Not from Kuwait, not through a screen, not when I could still be gaslit into thinking my instincts were an overreaction. Instead, I watched. I documented only what I could access legally through accounts that were already shared. The phone plan, the joint credit card statements, social media check-ins that people posted without thinking. At first, I tried to find the innocent explanation, the one where my sister was just supporting my boyfriend while I was away, the one where Ethan was calling her because she was good at cheering him up. But innocence doesn't need secrecy. It doesn't need 2:13 a.m. calls that last 40 minutes. It doesn't need canceled video chats on nights when she's tagged at a restaurant across town. Little inconsistencies started stacking into something solid. Ethan told me he was exhausted and going to bed early. Then I'd check the call metadata later and see a 25-minute call to Jasmine at midnight. He said Jasmine came over once to help fix the kitchen sink. Then, 2 weeks later, he casually mentioned he'd called a plumber because it was too complicated. Then the credit card statement showed a purchase at Home Depot on the day the sink was supposedly fixed, and a receipt at a cheap diner near Jasmine's apartment an hour later. Separately, each detail meant nothing. Together they were a map, and I was learning how to read it. By the time we were in the last 6 weeks of deployment, I had a timeline so clean it made my stomach go numb. It started around month 4, right when the missed calls began, right when Ethan stopped sending photos. Right when his voice started sounding like he was performing loyal boyfriend instead of being one. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt. Because crying felt like giving the situation emotion it didn't deserve. It didn't deserve tears. It deserved consequences. Kevin found me late one night in the warehouse office. I was alone, staring at my phone with the kind of stillness that scares people. "You look like you're about to do something irreversible," he said. I didn't look up. "I'm about to do something inevitable." He took a slow breath, then nodded. "When you get home, you got somewhere to go if it goes bad." "I'll figure it out," I said, then quieter. "Can you cover for me if I need a few days?" Kevin didn't hesitate. "Whatever you need." The last month dragged like it was trying to punish me personally. I worked, slept, worked again. And I planned. I decided I wouldn't come home the way Ethan expected. I wouldn't let him choreograph my arrival like he'd choreographed his lies. So I did something small but strategic. I told Ethan my flight was delayed, that I'd land a day later, that I'd grab a ride from base and come home when I could. "Oh," he said too quickly. "Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Just keep me posted." His voice sounded relieved. Relief doesn't belong in the voice of someone waiting for you. Relief belongs in the voice of someone who needs time to cover tracks. I landed at Fort Hood on a Wednesday afternoon in August. The air was thick and hot and familiar in a way Kuwait never was. Kevin picked me up and drove me to my apartment complex around 6 p.m. The place looked exactly the same. Cheap vinyl siding. A parking lot full of mid-range sedans. The kind of neighborhood that's fine until you realize fine is the only thing it has going for it. My truck sat in its usual spot, dusty from 9 months of not being touched. I stood there with my deployment bag and stared up at the second-floor unit. Inside was my boyfriend. Inside was the life I thought I had. And standing in that parking lot, I realized something that scared me more than anger ever could. I felt nothing. No excitement. No relief. No longing. Just cold calculation. I used my key and stepped inside quietly. The TV was on. A reality show Ethan liked. Some woman screaming about betrayal like the universe had a sense of humor. Ethan was on the couch in sweatpants and one of my old army hoodies, scrolling on his phone. When he saw me, he jumped so hard his phone flew out of his hand. "Oh my God, Elise," he gasped. "I thought you weren't coming until tomorrow." "Flight got in early," I said lightly. "Wanted to surprise you." He scrambled up, suddenly nervous in a way that didn't match the situation. You should have called. I would have cleaned up, made dinner, something special. The apartment was spotless, cleaner than it had ever been when I lived here full time, like someone had been preparing for an inspection or hiding evidence. We hugged, and it felt like hugging a stranger wearing Ethan's skin. He asked about the flight, Kuwait, if I was tired. Small talk from someone trying to stay ahead of a story. I played along, told him it was fine, that I was exhausted, that we could order food and just relax. He agreed instantly, already reaching for his phone as if ordering takeout was a script he could follow safely. While he scrolled, I walked through the apartment casually, slowly. The way you inspect a warehouse after a minor incident, knowing the real damage, is never where people want you to look. Everything looked normal, until it didn't. The photos were gone. The framed picture of us that used to sit on the bookshelf, gone. The little magnet photos I'd sent from overseas that used to live on the fridge, gone. Even the courthouse photo my mom insisted we print because it's still a wedding, missing. I didn't say anything. I just kept walking. In the bedroom, I opened the closet, pretending I was just putting my bag away. And that's when I saw it. A jacket that wasn't mine. Not Ethan's either. Size large. A cheap construction company logo on the back. The fabric smelled like body spray so strong it almost burned. Jasmine's signature move had always been drowning herself in perfume, like it was armor. I stood there holding that jacket, and something inside me clicked into place so cleanly it felt like a lock turning. Ethan called from the living room, cheerful and too loud. "Food'll be here in 30. I hung the jacket back exactly where it had been. Returned to the living room. Sat beside him on the couch like we were still a couple. We ate takeout, watched TV. He laughed at jokes that weren't funny. Asked me questions like he was collecting intel. When I answered, I kept my tone neutral, my face calm. Because the more normal I acted, the more he relaxed. And the more he relaxed, the more he revealed. After dinner, Ethan yawned dramatically and said, "You should sleep on the couch tonight." I blinked. Why? He smiled like it was thoughtful. "Time zones. You're probably still adjusting. I don't want to disturb you if you toss and turn." We'd shared a bed through jet lag before. We'd shared a bed through flu season. We'd shared a bed through fights. But now he wanted distance, because distance was safer. "Sure," I said, because my voice was steady, even when my heart wasn't. I settled on the couch with a blanket. The lights went off, and I listened, to the sound of him moving in the bedroom, to the faint buzz of his phone lighting up again and again, to the quiet kind of urgency that only exists when someone is trying to answer messages without making noise. Around 2 a.m., I checked the shared phone account again. 7 texts to Jasmine in the last hour, all after he thought I'd fallen asleep. I didn't need the content. The pattern was the confession. I lay there staring at the dark ceiling, and I realized the most terrifying thing about betrayal. It doesn't always crash into your life with screaming and shattered glass. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, wearing your hoodie, sleeping in your bed, and smiling at you like you're the one who's been gone too long. The next morning, Ethan was overly cheerful. Coffee ready, breakfast made, bright eyes like he'd rehearsed normal in front of a mirror. "So," he said, buttering toast with unnecessary enthusiasm, "when are you going to see your parents?" There it was. The question underneath the question. The request underneath the smile. I took a sip of coffee, let it burn my tongue. "I should probably visit them this weekend," I said. Relief flashed across his face so fast he didn't even realize he showed it. "Oh, that's a great idea," he said, voice too light. "I'm sure they've missed you." "Probably," I said. He smiled. "I've got some errands anyway, so it works out." We both smiled. We both lied. And while Ethan talked about grocery lists and laundry like he was a man with nothing to hide, I made my own quiet promise. If he wanted me out of the apartment, fine, I'd go. But not because he asked. Because I needed the space to do what I do best. I needed room to turn suspicion into certainty, and certainty into action. Because I wasn't going to confront this with emotion. I was going to confront it with proof. Ethan left that afternoon with the kind of casual confidence that only comes from believing you're still in control. "I'm going to run a few errands," he said, slipping on his shoes. "Get some groceries. Maybe swing by my parents' place." He kissed my cheek on the way out. It felt rehearsed. "Drive safe," I said, and watched him leave like I was watching someone exit a stage after their final line. The door clicked shut, and the apartment, my apartment, fell into a silence that finally felt honest. I stood there for a full minute without moving. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I knew exactly what I was about to find. When you work logistics long enough, you learn something important. You never start with what you hope to find. You start with what you're allowed to touch. So I did. I walked through the apartment slowly, phone in hand, documenting everything the way I would inventory a compromised site. Furniture we'd bought together, electronics, kitchen appliances, the couch I hated, but Ethan insisted on because it felt cozy. The TV we split down the middle. The cheap coffee table that wobbled unless you balanced it just right. I wasn't looking for proof of the affair. I already had that. I was preparing for separation. Because deep down, I knew there was no version of this story where I stayed. In the bedroom, Ethan's laptop sat on the desk like it always did. Open, charging, unguarded. He never locked it. Said passwords were a sign of mistrust. I sat down in the chair and opened it. The screen lit up instantly. No password prompt. No hesitation. The trust he'd preached so loudly had apparently only applied to me. I told myself I was just going to check finances, documents, maybe photos I'd need later. That lie lasted about 30 seconds. His email was already open, and right there, in the sidebar, was Jasmine's name. Not buried, not hidden, pinned. My hand didn't shake when I clicked it. The earliest messages were harmless enough, at least on the surface. Just checking in. How's Elise holding up over there? She must be so stressed. Support. Concern. The kind of language people use when they're building justification instead of boundaries. Then the tone shifted. Slowly. Naturally. Like boiling water you don't notice until it's too late. Inside jokes. Complaints about loneliness. Messages sent late at night when there's nothing else to do but think. Ethan wrote about how hard it was being alone. How deployment life changed people. How he felt like he was disappearing. Jasmine responded with sympathy. With understanding. With reassurance that he was still seen. By month 5, the pretense was gone. The emails weren't coded anymore. They were explicit. Plans. Dates. Apologies for missing each other. Jokes about how careful they had to be when I called. I read every word. Not because I wanted to hurt myself, but because I needed to know exactly who they were when they thought I wasn't looking. And then I saw the subject line that made my vision narrow. Appointment confirmation. OBGYN. My fingers paused over the trackpad. I clicked. The attachment loaded slowly, like it wanted to give me time to brace. An ultrasound image filled the screen. Black and white. Grainy. Undeniable. Across the top, printed clearly in clinical font, patient, Jasmine Harper. Gestational age, 12 weeks. I didn't breathe. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at that image while something inside me shut down piece by piece, like a system failing safely instead of catastrophically. 12 weeks. I did the math automatically. 12 weeks meant conception happened 5 months into my deployment, right when Ethan's calls started changing, right when Jasmine's support became something else, right when my marriage stopped existing and I just hadn't been informed yet. There were emails attached to the ultrasound. Ethan asking what she wanted to do. Jasmine saying she needed time, that things were complicated with me coming home soon. No mention of guilt. No talk of ending anything. Just logistics. I copied everything. Emails, attachments, photos. To one external drive. Then another. Then a third. I encrypted them all. Stored 2 in my deployment bag. 1 in my truck's lockbox. Redundancy saves lives. It saves sanity, too. When I closed the laptop, I noticed my hands were still steady. That scared me more than if they'd been shaking. I put the computer back exactly where I'd found it. Plugged in. Screen angled the same way. I didn't want Ethan to know anything had changed. Not yet. I spent the next hour sitting on the edge of the bed, doing math. Not financial math. Timeline math. How long they'd been lying. How many video calls she'd smiled through knowing she was pregnant with my boyfriend's child. How many chances they'd had to tell me the truth. And how deliberately they'd chosen not to. By the time Ethan texted, heading home soon, my decision was already made. That night, after he fell asleep beside me like nothing had happened, I got up quietly. I didn't pack everything. Just what was mine. Clothes, gear, documents, electronics, the things I could claim without argument. I loaded them into my truck under cover of darkness, moving calmly, efficiently, like this was just another deployment. By morning, I was ready. Before leaving, I called my parents. Hey, I said lightly, can I stop by tonight? I want to talk. They sounded thrilled. Mom said she'd cook. Dad said it had been too long. I didn't correct them. I drove to a storage facility and rented a climate-controlled unit in my name only. Dropped off my bags. Then I headed toward Austin. My parents' house looked exactly the same. Manicured lawn. Flower beds my mother obsessed over. Dad's expensive grill on the patio. And in the driveway, Jasmine's car. Of course it was. I sat there for a moment with the engine running, staring at it. Then I turned the engine off. Grabbed my bag. and walked toward the front door, knowing that whatever happened next would break my family into pieces. And this time, there would be no pretending it was an accident. My mother opened the door before I even knocked. "Elise," she cried, pulling me into a hug so tight it stole the breath from my lungs. "You should have told us you were coming today. I would have made something special." "This is special," I said, because it was the truth in the most ironic way possible. My father stood behind her, smiling in that proud, contained way he always had. He hugged me next, firm, grounding. "Good to have you home safe, sweetheart." Then I saw Jasmine. She lingered near the hallway like a guest who wasn't sure she was welcome. Her smile was cautious, careful, the smile of someone who knows the floor might give out beneath her at any moment. "Hey, Elise," she said. "It's good to see you." "Yeah," I replied evenly. "You too." No one commented on the tension. That's one of my family's specialties. Pretending discomfort is just a draft you can close a door on. Dinner was pot roast, my favorite. The good dishes were out. The ones my mom only used for holidays or company she wanted to impress. Everything looked normal. That was the part that almost broke me. Mom talked too much. About neighbors, about church gossip, about how her hydrangeas were finally blooming again. Dad asked about Kuwait, about work, about whether I'd be staying at Fort Hood or getting new orders. Jasmine barely spoke, pushing food around her plate like it might bite her back. Halfway through the meal, my mother smiled at me and asked the question I'd been waiting for. "So, where's Ethan? I thought he'd come with you." I didn't look at Jasmine. "He's visiting his parents this weekend," I said calmly. "Wanted to give me time to adjust and come see you first." My mother beamed. "Oh, that's so thoughtful of him. You really picked a good man, Elise. You're lucky." I took a slow bite of pot roast and nodded. "Lucky." After dinner, Dad suggested coffee on the back patio. "Just us," he said, "like old times." Mom started clearing dishes. Jasmine stood too quickly. "I'll help," she said, voice tight. Dad, Jasmine, and I stepped outside into the warm Texas evening. Cicadas buzzed in the trees. Somewhere down the street, kids were laughing. A neighbor's dog barked once, then settled. Normal life continued. Dad poured coffee into mugs from a thermos Mom had sent out. We sat. I waited. Jasmine lit a cigarette, her hand shaking just enough to notice. "So," Dad said eventually, "you planning to make the army a long-term thing? Or thinking about civilian life, "I haven't decided," I said. "Got some things to figure out first." Jasmine exhaled smoke and forced a laugh. "Must be weird, being back after 9 months." "You get used to weird," I replied. Silence stretched. I let it. I watched my father shift in his chair. Watched Jasmine avoid my eyes. Watched the moment ripen the way you wait for a storm you can already smell. Then I spoke. "There's something I need to tell both of you." Dad looked up, alert. Jasmine went very still. "I'm filing for divorce." The words landed like a dropped plate. Mom, stepping onto the patio with more coffee, froze. "What?" she said. "Elise, what are you talking about?" Dad's voice sharpened. "Why?" "No fight," I said. "No misunderstanding. Ethan's been having an affair." My mother gasped. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Honey, I'm so sorry." Dad frowned. "Are you sure? Deployments are stressful. Sometimes things look—" "I'm sure," I said calmly. "I have proof. Emails, call logs, photos, months' worth." Mom sank into a chair, hand over her mouth. "With who?" she asked. "Anyone we know?" I turned my head. Looked directly at Jasmine. "Yes," I said. "We know her very well." The color drained from her face so fast it was almost frightening. Dad followed my gaze. Confusion flickered across his expression, then realization. "No," he said slowly. "Elise, what are you saying?" "I'm saying Ethan's been sleeping with Jasmine since January," I replied, "and she's 4 months pregnant with his child." The world went silent. Even the cicadas seemed to pause. My mother made a sound that didn't belong to any language. Jasmine opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. I didn't, Elise, I'm so sorry. It just happened?" I asked quietly. "For 5 months?" Dad stood so abruptly his chair fell over. "Is this true?" he demanded, turning to Jasmine. "Answer me." Jasmine nodded, tears spilling down her face. "Yes." Dad looked like he'd been punched. "You slept with your sister's partner while she was deployed," he said, voice shaking. "You let her call you from overseas while you—" "I'm sorry," Jasmine sobbed. "I never meant for it to go this far." Dad pointed toward the house. "Get out." "Dad, please." "Get out of my house, now." Jasmine stumbled to her feet and ran inside. Moments later, the front door slammed. Her car engine roared to life and peeled out of the driveway. My mother was crying openly now. Dad sank back into his chair, suddenly looking older than I'd ever seen him. "I don't know what to say," he said hoarsely. "I'm so sorry." I nodded. "I know." Then I asked the question I'd been carrying with me since Kuwait. I need you both to understand something, I said. I will not be asked to forgive her. I will not be told family is forever. I will not be pressured to fix this. Dad nodded immediately. You won't be. I turned to my mother. She looked torn in half. But she's still my daughter, she whispered. And you're my daughter too. Yes, I said softly, which means you have a choice to make. Her face crumpled. I stood. Let me know what you decide, I said. I'm done pretending this can be undone. I walked to my truck without looking back. And for the first time since all of this started, I felt something crack through the numbness. Not rage. Not grief. Clarity. Monday morning came with the kind of clarity that only arrives after something has already shattered. I didn't wake up hoping Ethan would explain himself. I woke up knowing exactly what I needed to do. At 9:20 a.m., I sat across from Sandra Hayes, a family law attorney in Austin, whose office walls were lined with degrees and quiet confidence. Mid-50s, silver hair pulled back. The expression of someone who had seen every possible way people could destroy each other and survive it. I told her everything. The deployment, the distance, the calls, Jasmine, the ultrasound. I slid the encrypted drive across the desk. Sandra reviewed the files methodically, flipping through pages like she was reading a manual. This is thorough, she said finally. I work in logistics, I replied. Patterns matter. She nodded. Texas is a no-fault divorce state, but documented infidelity strengthens your position. The pregnancy complicates emotions, not obligations. You're not the biological parent. You won't owe child support. How long? I asked. Uncontested? 90 days. Contested? Longer. He'll contest, I said. He won't want to look bad. Sandra gave a knowing smile. Then we prepare. By noon, I'd changed my bank passwords, opened a new individual account, and transferred exactly half of the joint funds. Fair was fair, even when fairness wasn't returned. That afternoon, I went back to the apartment. Ethan was waiting, sitting on the couch, hands clasped like he'd been rehearsing a confession in his head. We need to talk, he said immediately. I know, I replied. That's why I'm here. I sat in the armchair across from him. I know about Jasmine, I said. I know about the baby. I know everything. His face drained of color. I can explain it. No, I said calmly. I don't want explanations. I want a divorce. His voice cracked. Please, just listen. This wasn't supposed to happen. That's what happens when you make the same choice for 5 months, I replied. It stops being an accident. Ethan stood, pacing. We can fix this. Counseling. Time. People make mistakes. Mistakes are forgetting milk, I said. This was a decision. He reached for my arm. I stepped back. My lawyer will be filing papers today, I said. I'm moving out. We'll split everything fairly. You can't just leave, he pleaded. Your parents won't let you. I met his eyes. Then they can have Jasmine and you. I'm not competing for my own dignity. I walked out. Sandra had Ethan served at work the next day. Professional, public, clean. My phone exploded. Ethan begging. Jasmine apologizing. My mother asking me to reconsider. My father asking what I needed. I answered only my father. Time, I texted, and space. You have it, he replied, completely. 2 weeks later, I got a call from an unknown number. This is Heather, the woman said. I'm Jasmine's landlord. Your father gave me your number. My stomach dropped. Why are you calling me? She disappeared, Heather said. Left the apartment trashed. Owes $2,400 in rent. I closed my eyes. When did she leave? 3 days ago. Packed overnight. Of course she did. I called my father after. She ran, he said quietly. Didn't say where. Your mother's worried. That's her choice, I replied. The divorce dragged exactly the way Sandra predicted. Ethan contested. Claimed stress. Claimed reconciliation was possible. Then Sandra submitted the evidence. Emails. Call logs. Photos. The ultrasound. Ethan's lawyer went silent. I offered Ethan everything in the apartment. Furniture. TV. Dishes. I just want out, I told Sandra. The judge noticed. 3 months later, it was over. I was free. That night, 2 messages came in. One from Ethan. I need help. One from Jasmine. Please. I blocked both. Some bridges burn themselves. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Kevin told me the news like he was passing along weather updates. We were back in the warehouse, processing equipment returns, the rhythm of normal life slowly stitching itself back together. Ethan had the baby, he said carefully. A girl, 7 pounds, 3 ounces. I nodded. That was it. No spike of emotion, no ache, no curiosity. Just information. You okay? Kevin asked. I'm fine, I said, and for the first time since this all started, it wasn't a lie. He hesitated. There's more. There always was. Jasmine showed up for the birth. Stayed 2 days, then disappeared again. Didn't put his name on the birth certificate. From what I hear, things aren't good. I leaned back against a crate and crossed my arms. Karma doesn't rush, I said. It just arrives on schedule. Life moved on the way it always does, quietly, without asking permission. I got promoted to a senior logistics role coordinating supply operations across multiple bases. Better pay, better hours, fewer emergencies, more respect. I started dating again. Not recklessly, not desperately, just intentionally. His name was Ben Carter, a civilian contractor who worked in procurement. Smart. Grounded. The kind of man who listened more than he spoke and never treated my career like an inconvenience. One night, while we were cooking dinner at his place, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I already knew who it was before I opened the message. Ethan, I know I don't deserve it, but I need help. Jasmine's gone again. I can't afford rent. My parents cut me off. Please. I stared at the screen longer than I expected. Not because I was tempted, because I was finally detached enough to recognize what he was doing. He wasn't reaching out because he loved me. He was reaching out because I had always been the solution. I blocked the number. 2 days later, another message came in. Different number. Jasmine, I know I hurt you. I know I ruined everything, but I'm desperate. Please. I wouldn't ask if I had another option. I blocked that one too. Ben noticed the shift in my expression. Everything okay? He asked. My ex and my sister are having a rough time, I said. They're asking for help. He didn't flinch. And? He asked. And I said nothing. He smiled, small and approving. Good. That mattered more than I expected. A few weeks later, my parents flew out to visit me for my birthday. Just the three of us. No Jasmine. No apologies disguised as concern. We had dinner at a quiet steakhouse near base. Talked about work. About their accounting firm. About nothing that hurt. After dessert, my father slid an envelope across the table. These are yours, he said. I opened it. Savings bonds. Matured. $25,000. Purchased in my name when I was a kid. Jasmine cashed hers out last year, my mother said quietly. We held on to yours. Wanted to give it to you directly. Thank you, I said, meaning it. There's more, Dad added. We updated our will. I looked up sharply. Everything goes to you, my mother said firmly. Jasmine's inheritance is going into a trust for her daughter. She won't be able to touch it. You don't have to do that, I said. Yes, we do, my mother replied. We protected her for too long, and it cost you. For the first time, I believed her. 3 months later, my father called with news he already knew how I'd receive. Jasmine's in jail, he said. What happened? Check fraud. Tried writing bad checks at 3 stores. Got caught at the 3rd. I exhaled slowly. Is she asking for bail money? Yes. And? I told her no. Good, I said. He hesitated. Your mother wanted to know if you'd talk to her. Not help, just talk. No, I said gently. I hope she figures her life out. But that conversation doesn't involve me anymore. Jasmine spent 30 days in county jail. Got out on probation. Last I heard, she was working part-time and sharing a cramped apartment with people who didn't trust her. Ethan bounced between jobs, between apologies, between versions of himself that never stuck. Neither of them got a redemption arc. No dramatic reconciliation. No fairy tale turnaround. Just consequences. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I got orders for a new duty station in Germany. Better position, better pay. A fresh start in a country that didn't know my family's mistakes. Ben agreed to come with me, as my boyfriend. Maybe more if time proved kind. We signed a lease on a furnished apartment in Stuttgart. I started learning German online. Planned trips to Prague, Amsterdam, Barcelona. Built a life that didn't include people who mistook my loyalty for weakness. The night before I flew out, my parents took me to dinner. Quiet Italian place. Soft lighting. Real conversation. I'm proud of you, my father said. You handled this with more strength than I ever could have. I just did what needed to be done, I replied. No, my mother said firmly. You chose yourself, and that takes courage. Driving away from the restaurant, I realized something that finally felt like closure. Jasmine had wanted my life. My stability, my partner, my safety net. So I let her take it, and I walked away with something better. My future. Some people would call that cold. I call it justice.